In the heart of West Africa, where the Sahel whispers secrets to the Sahara, a young captain named Ibrahim Traore emerged from the ranks of the Burkinabe army, not as a politician, nor as a general, but as a man of fierce conviction. Born on March 14, 1988, in Bobo Dioulasso, he grew up in a country where betrayal had long hidden behind diplomacy and promises had dried up like rainless rivers. Traore had the fire of Thomas Sankara in his blood. Trained in Mali, hardened in Burkina Faso's anti-terror campaigns, and shaped by the struggles of his people, he rose quietly. His eyes were sharp, his voice calm, and his loyalty was not to the elite, but to the forgotten villages tormented by insurgents. In 2022, the people had grown weary. President Paul-Henri Damiba, who had himself come power via a coup earlier that year, failed to stop the wave of jihadist violence. Villages fell, markets burned, soldiers died without orders. Morale broke. On the 30th of September, 2022, a thunderbolt cracked across Burkina Faso's skies. Captain Ibrahim Traore announced he had taken power. No gunfire in the streets, just a military communique, firm and precise. He stood, cloaked in camouflage, in front of the national flag and said, "We had decided to take our responsibilities, driven by the single desire to safeguard the nation." He was 34 years old, the youngest leader in the world, and he had just taken the throne of a nation on fire. The months that followed were turbulent. The West looked on with suspicion, demanding a return to civilian rule. But Traore moved differently. He visited villages personally, slept in the field with his troops, and wore the same dusty boots as his soldiers. His popularity soared, not among elites, but among the youth, the farmers, the displaced. His vision was clear: a sovereign Burkina Faso, free from neo-colonial interference. Under his leadership, the country expelled French troops, cut off ties with Western military presence, and strengthened ties with other Sahelian nations, especially Mali and Niger. And then came the visit that shook the balance. In 2023, Captain Traore traveled to Moscow. He did not go as a beggar, but as a partner. The Russian government received him as a head of state, despite not being fully recognized by all international institutions. Images of Traore meeting Russian officials, including symbolic gestures of friendship, spread like wildfire across African social media. He spoke in strong terms of Burkina Faso's right to determine its allies and to forge a future free of colonizers. Russia, in turn, saw in him a key figure in a shifting geopolitical game, a young revolutionary leader unafraid to defy the old world order. Some said Traore was leaning too far east. Others claimed he was pragmatic, seeking military hardware, trade partnerships, and training support wherever he could get it. But to his people, he was a lion among jackals, a man who stood tall when others bowed. Recognition came not through handshakes from foreign presidents, but through the trust of the African youth. In every corner of Francophone Africa, murals of Traore appeared beside portraits of Sankara and Lumumba. He was seen as a new anti-colonial icon, not because of grand speeches, but because of action. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso tightened internal security, launched community-based defense initiatives, and worked to reclaim territory from extremists. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, criticisms, and power struggles. But Traore remained focused. He refused to wear suits to please the West. He preferred fatigues and the national colors. He refused scripted interviews. He spoke directly to the people through social media and town visits. He refused to rule from behind walls. He stood on the front lines. Captain Ibrahim Traore is not yet a legend, but he is becoming one. His name evokes fear in the hearts of bandits and hope in the eyes of the poor. His throne is not made of gold, but of sacrifice. His crown is not forged of diamonds, but of duty. History will decide what kind of ruler he becomes. But for now, in the red earth of Burkina Faso, the panther walks proudly, watched by a continent ready to rise. By 2024, Burkina Faso was no longer the quiet shadow of West Africa. It had become a blazing torch of defiance and national pride. With Captain Traore at the helm, the country had taken steps many feared to take, breaking away from the French military presence, forging its own alliances, and standing on the battlefield alongside its own people. In early 2024, whispers began to spread through diplomatic channels. Captain Ibrahim Traore had been invited to Russia, not for a routine visit, but a state-level discussion with President Vladimir Putin himself. And what happened next stunned even seasoned political watchers. President Putin sent a presidential aircraft, one of his personal planes, to bring Traore to Moscow. It was a gesture not just of formality, but of recognition, respect, and political symbolism. When the Russian presidential aircraft landed in Ouagadougou, it gleamed beneath the Sahelian sun like a silver hawk of empire. It bore the Russian flag and the full insignia of a sovereign visit. Soldiers stood in salute. Civilians gathered at the airport fences. Social media exploded. As Traore boarded the aircraft, he paused at the top of the stairs, turned to the crowd, and raised his fist. Not in triumph, but in unity. The world was watching. In the skies above the Sahara, the message was clear. Burkina Faso would no longer beg at any table. In Moscow, Captain Traore was received not merely as a rebel soldier, but as a head of state. Russian media broadcasted his arrival as a sign of shifting global tides. Inside the gilded halls of the Kremlin, he met with senior Russian officials, strategists, and finally, President Vladimir Putin himself. Behind closed doors, they discussed military cooperation, weapon support, drone and intelligence technology, infrastructure deals, and a new vision for African sovereignty. Russia saw in Traore not just a client, but a gateway to a new order in West Africa, alongside the military governments of Mali and Niger, forming what many began to call the Sahel Coalition. The gesture of sending Putin's aircraft was not lost on the world. It was a diplomatic thunderclap. And in the streets of Ouagadougou, murals of Traore now showed him not just as a soldier, but as a statesman, a symbol of African courage against foreign domination. But Captain Traore's path remains perilous. At home, he faces enemies both seen and hidden, remnants of the old elite, extremist insurgents, and global actors who fear an Africa rising on its own terms. He rules not from comfort, but from a throne made of thorns and fire. Yet, his connection to the youth and rural people is unmatched. With every speech in the local Moor and Diola tongues, with every step into the conflict zones, he cements his legend. Today, the Burkinabe flag flies higher than ever before in the minds of its people. And the world has learned that recognition does not come through elections alone. It comes when a leader walks with his people, when he reclaims the dignity of a battered nation, and when he dares to look global powers in the eye and say, "We are no longer your servants." In the Sahel, they now say, "The lion roared, but the panther walked in the shadow and struck." And so walks Captain Ibrahim Traore, the Panther of Burkina Faso, no longer a whisper in the bush, but a name etched in the story of Africa's awakening.